May 7, 1954. After 57 days of siege, 10,000 French troops surrender to a guerrilla army they dismissed as primitive. An empire collapses, a superpower retreats, and the world learns a terrifying lesson. Modern technology and firepower mean nothing against an enemy willing to dig. Beneath the jungle of northwest Vietnam, the Viet Minh had constructed something unprecedented. Miles of underground tunnels, fortified bunkers, and concealed artillery positions carved into mountainsides. While French forces sat in their valley fortress confident of air superiority and artillery dominance, their enemy was literally undermining them. The Battle of Dien Bien Phu wasn't won by better weapons or more soldiers. It was won by thousands of peasants moving artillery through impossible terrain, digging tunnels under constant bombardment, and engineering an underground fortress that made conventional military doctrine obsolete. By the end of this video, you'll understand how a peasant army defeated a colonial power, why Dien Bien Phu changed military strategy forever, and how the tunnels and bunkers of 1954 became the blueprint for Vietnam's next war with America. Hit subscribe. This is the battle that ended empires and changed history. To understand Dien Bien Phu, we must first understand why France chose to make it stand in a remote valley surrounded by jungle-covered mountains, a decision that would prove catastrophic. The colonial context French Indochina, 1887 to 1954, included modern Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia. French colonial rule for 67 years. Rubber plantations, rice exports, resource extraction. Vietnamese independence movement. Growing World War II. Japanese occupation weakened French control. The Viet Minh Ho Chi Minh's independence movement, founded 1941 to resist Japanese, then French, led by General Vo Nguyen Giap. Guerrilla tactics learned from Chinese communists. Popular support among rural Vietnamese controlled large areas of countryside. The French strategy after World War II. France attempted to reclaim colony. Modern military with air support, tanks, artillery. Professional soldiers and Foreign Legion troops controlled cities and major routes but couldn't defeat rural guerrilla movement. Sought decisive battle to crush Viet Minh. The location: Dien Bien Phu Valley, northwest Vietnam, near Laos border. Valley 19 kilometers long, 6 kilometers wide, surrounded by hills 400 to 700 meters high. Remote location: 300 kilometers from Hanoi. Strategic position blocking Viet Minh supply routes to Laos. The fateful decision: November 1953. French command decided. Establish fortified base in Dien Bien Phu Valley. Force Viet Minh into conventional battle. Use superior firepower and air support. Destroy guerrilla army. Decisively named Operation Castor. The French confidence. Why? France thought they'd win. Superior firepower, modern artillery, tank support, total air superiority, napalm, and heavy bombs. Professional military training. Strategic assumptions: Viet Minh couldn't move heavy artillery through mountains, jungle terrain, impossible for large-scale operations. Vietnamese lacked engineering capability. Air supply could sustain garrison indefinitely. Enemy would be forced into open battle. The fatal flaw: French planners ignored critical factor. Valley completely surrounded by mountains. Hills provided perfect artillery positions. Jungle concealed enemy movements. Monsoon season would limit air operations. Supply lines vulnerable. Vietnamese saying, "The lowland is convenient, but the highland commands." The commander, Colonel Christian de Castries, cavalry officer, aristocratic background, commanded garrison of 10,800 troops initially, later reinforced to 16,000. Confident in French superiority, would face siege against 50,000 Viet Minh. The strong points French established named defensive positions: Beatrice, Gabrielle, Anne-Marie, Northern Hills; Huguette, Françoise, Claudine, Airfield Area; Dominique, Elaine, Eastern Hills; Isabelle, Southern Strong Point, 6 kilometers away, named after commanders' mistresses, rumored. What French didn't know, intelligence failed to detect. Viet Minh assembling 50,000 plus troops. Heavy artillery being transported through impossible terrain. Massive tunnel construction. Anti-aircraft guns positioned in mountains. Complete encirclement already underway. If discovering how a guerrilla army engineered an underground fortress to defeat a superpower fascinates you, drop a like. This is military engineering that changed history. The French gambled everything on one assumption: the Viet Minh couldn't possibly move heavy artillery through mountainous jungle. They were catastrophically wrong. The problem: Viet Minh faced seemingly impossible challenge: Heavy artillery in northern Vietnam needed at Dien Bien Phu, 600 kilometers away mountains, jungle, no roads. French controlled all major routes. Air supremacy meant daylight movement suicidal. The artillery Viet Minh artillery included 105 mm howitzers, captured from French/Chinese supplied, 75 mm field guns, 37 mm anti-aircraft guns, 120 mm mortars. Soviet supplied Katyusha rockets. Each gun weighed 1 to 2 tons plus ammunition. Impossible solution. General Giap's engineering feat. Human porterage 200. 000 civilian volunteers mobilized. Bicycles modified to carry 200 plus kg pieces disassembled and carried by hand. Mountains climbed. Jungle cleared. Worked only at night to avoid French aircraft. The bicycle revolution. Modified Chinese bicycles. Bamboo poles, extended handlebars, could carry 200 to 300 kilograms, 440 to 660 pounds. Pushed, not ridden, through jungle. Steel horses in Vietnamese road construction. Created network of concealed trails. Logs laid across muddy sections. Bridges built over rivers at night, camouflaged from air. Constantly repaired after French bombing. The timeline. Movement began December 1953. 3 months of continuous transport. Workers moving through mountains. Guns arrived piece by piece, assembled in concealed positions. French intelligence completely missed it. The strategic positioning. Artillery placed in mountains, overlooking French valley positions. Concealed in jungle and caves. Pre-sighted on French strong points. Protected from counter battery fire. Commanding view of entire valley. The camouflage concealment techniques. Guns in caves carved into hillsides. False jungle canopy over positions. Fired from concealment. Then withdrawn entrances covered between firing. Invisible to French observation. The numbers. By March 1954, Viet Minh had positioned 144 artillery pieces. French estimated max 20. 48 anti-aircraft guns, dozens of mortars and rocket launchers. Complete ammunition supply chain. Replacement parts and maintenance capability. The Shock March. 1954. Battle begins. Massive artillery barrage struck French positions. Intensity, completely unexpected. Strong point Beatrice destroyed in hours. French artillery commander committed suicide. We're done for. His final words. The air defense anti-aircraft guns created no-fly zone. French aircraft shot down regularly. Supply drops became extremely dangerous. Medical evacuation, impossible. Air superiority neutralized French trapped on ground. The engineering triumph. What Viet Minh achieved. Moved tons of artillery through impossible terrain. Positioned guns for maximum effect. Maintained supply chain under bombardment. Created artillery superiority from nothing. Overcame every French assumption. The French miscalculation. Why intelligence failed. Underestimation. Assumed Vietnamese lacked capability. Dismissed jungle transport as impossible. Believed air power would detect any buildup. Thought peasant army couldn't handle complex artillery. Colonial racism blinded them to enemy competence. The lesson. Never underestimate determined enemy. Technology alone doesn't guarantee victory. Local knowledge and motivation overcome firepower. Ingenuity defeats conventional wisdom. While French forces sat in surface fortifications, the Viet Minh were creating an underground city. A network of tunnels, bunkers, and supply routes that made them virtually invulnerable. The tunnel system. Viet Minh engineering created miles of approach trenches. Underground bunkers for troops. Ammunition storage caves. Command and control centers. Medical facilities. Supply routes connecting everything. The approach trenches. Revolutionary siege warfare. Traditional siege. Attackers assault. Defensive positions. High casualties from defensive fire. Requires overwhelming numbers. Viet Minh innovation. Dug trenches from mountains toward French lines. Advanced underground, meter by meter protected troops from artillery. Allowed close approach without exposure. Modern version of medieval siege trenches. The construction built under constant bombardment. Workers dug at night supported by wooden frames and bamboo. Spoil removed and concealed. Connected to rear supply routes. Expanded continuously during 57-day siege. The Scalaby battles end. Hundreds of kilometers of trenches advanced to within meters of French lines. Created complete ring around valley. Some trenches 2 to 3 meters deep. Bomb-proof shelters every few meters. The command bunkers. General Giap's headquarters. Dug into mountainside. Multiple rooms for staff. Communication equipment. Maps and planning facilities. Protected from bombing. Overlooked entire battlefield. The artillery positions. Gun emplacements in mountains. Carved caves into hillsides. Position guns inside. Rolled out to fire. Withdrew after virtually immune to counter-battery. French couldn't locate or destroy them. The supply network. Underground logistics system. Ammunition brought forward through tunnels, food and water distributed, wounded evacuated to rear replacements, moved to front, all protected from artillery and air attack. The medical facilities, underground hospitals, carved into caves, operating rooms with electric light supplied through tunnel network, treated thousands of wounded. Survival rates surprisingly high. The anti-aircraft positions, 37 guns positioned to protect artillery from air attack, deny French air superiority, force supply planes higher, less accurate drops, shoot down aircraft daily, create no-fly zone over battlefield. The camouflage discipline, concealment was total. No movement during daylight, all work done at night, cooking fires only in concealed areas, smoke dispersed through bamboo pipes. French aerial photos showed empty jungle. The comparison, Viet Minh tunnels versus French positions. French surface bunkers and trenches visible to artillery observers, vulnerable to bombing, limited mobility, supply by air only. Viet Minh underground protection, invisible from air, safe from artillery, free movement at night, secure supply lines. The psychological impact, French soldiers reported enemy appearing from nowhere, attacks from unexpected directions, feeling completely surrounded, no safe area in valley, constant fear of underground assault. The engineering skills Vietnamese workers demonstrated sophisticated tunneling techniques, structural engineering knowledge, drainage systems, monsoon season, ventilation for underground spaces, logistics planning, the resources, minimal tools used, shovels and picks, bamboo supports, woven mat revetments, human labor, local materials, created fortress comparable to modern military engineering with primitive tools. The legacy Dien Bien Phu tunnels became model for later Siu Chi tunnels, American War, standard Viet Cong tactic, proof that tunnels defeat firepower, template for asymmetric warfare studied by military worldwide. The Viet Minh dug hundreds of kilometers of tunnels under constant French bombardment using primitive tools. This engineering feat alone is astonishing. What does it say about the power of human determination versus technological superiority? Share your thoughts in the comments. March 13th to May 7th, 1954. For 57 days, 16,000 French troops fought a desperate battle against 50,000 Viet Minh forces. The siege would become one of the most significant military defeats in modern history. Phase 1. The opening barrage, March 13th to 17th. Day 1, March 13th, 1954:5:00 p.m. Massive artillery barrage begins. Strong Point Beatrice targeted. First French artillery commander commits suicide. Beatrice falls by midnight. 500 French casualties in hours. Day 2-5. Strong Point Gabriel assaulted. Thai auxiliary troops. Desert Anne-Marie northern defenses collapse. French perimeter shrinks dramatically. Airfield now under direct fire. Phase 2. The grind, March 18th to April 30th. The pattern established. Viet Minh shell French positions continuously. Tunnels advance closer. Daily French conduct. Local counterattacks. Casualties mount on both sides. No relief force possible. The airfield unusable after March 27th under artillery fire. Supply by parachute drop only. Many supplies fall in Viet Minh lines. Wounded cannot be evacuated. Morale collapses. The monsoon. Heavy rains begin late March. Trenches flood. Wounded lying in mud. Sanitation breaks down. Disease spreads. Phase 3. The final assault, May 1st to 7th. May 1-6. Viet Minh concentrate on eastern strongpoint Céline and Dominique under massive assault. Hand-to-hand combat in trenches. French conduct. Desperate counterattacks. Position becomes untenable. May 7, 1954. Final assault begins 5 p.m. Overwhelms remaining defenses. Colonel de Castries surrenders 5:30 p.m. Last radio message. We're blowing up everything. Vive la France. 10,000 French troops captured. The casualties. French Union forces. 293 killed. 195 wounded. 10,000 plus captured. 62 aircraft shot down. Entire garrison eliminated. Viet Minh estimated 23,000 casualties, 8,000 to 10,000 killed. Heavy losses in infantry assaults, but reserves available. Victory worth the cost. The conditions French soldiers endured. Constant artillery bombardment, no medical evacuation, limited food and water, monsoon flooding, surrounded by enemy, no hope of relief. The air supply problem. French depended entirely on airdrops. 4,000 tons of supplies dropped. 30-50% fell in enemy hands. Aircraft flying through flak. Pilots exhausted. Many supplies destroyed on landing. The failed relief operation Condor. Planned proposed relief column from Laos would take weeks to arrive. Deemed impossible. Never attempted. Garrison abandoned. The American question. U.S. considered intervention. Operation Vulture. Massive bombing, possibly including tactical nuclear weapons. President Eisenhower rejected it, set precedent for later U.S. involvement. Historical turning point, the heroism and horror stories from the siege. French courage. Soldiers fighting despite certain defeat, medics treating wounded in impossible conditions, pilots volunteering for dangerous supply missions, Foreign Legion refusing to surrender, Viet Minh determination. Soldiers advancing through artillery barrages, waves of attacks, despite casualties, workers maintaining supply lines, medics treating wounded in tunnel hospitals, the surrender, final moments. White flags raised across strong points, Viet Minh troops enter French positions, weapons collected. Prisoners assembled, wounded tended by captors, French Empire in Indochina effectively over the captivity prisoners faced. 500-mile march to prison camps, many died on march, harsh captivity conditions, political re-education released months later, the political impact in France. Government fell, public demanded end to colonial war, Geneva Conference convened, Indochina independence, negotiated era of French colonialism ending the military. Lessons Dien Bien Phu taught. Fortified positions need secure supply lines, air power alone cannot win wars, local support crucial for guerrilla wars, technology doesn't guarantee victory, underestimating enemy is fatal, modern military academies study Dien Bien Phu as textbook example of strategic overconfidence, intelligence failure, logistics problems, tactical inflexibility, moral factors in warfare. The fall of Dien Bien Phu didn't just end a battle, it changed the world. The consequences rippled across Asia, Europe, and eventually America. The Geneva Accords, July 1954, 2 months after Dien Bien Phu. International Conference in Switzerland, Vietnam divided at 17th parallel, North Vietnam under Ho Chi Minh, Communist, South Vietnam under Bao Dai/Ngo Dinh Diem, pro-Western elections promised for 1956, never held. French withdrawal from Indochina, Laos and Cambodia independent, the end of French Empire, Dien Bien Phu accelerated decolonization. French public demanded end to colonial wars, military defeat undermined imperial prestige, Algeria independence struggle intensified, other colonies sought independence, era of European colonialism, ending the birth of North Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh's government. Communist system implemented in Northland, reform, brutal, many executions. Soviet and Chinese support built modern military, preparing for eventual reunification. The American involvement begins, U.S. reaction to French defeat. Feared domino effect, communist expansion, backed South. Vietnamese government sent military advisors, provided weapons and funding, committed to preventing communist victory, path to Vietnam War beginning, the battlefield today, modern Dien Bien Phu. Small city in northwest Vietnam, French and Viet Minh cemeteries, museum and battlefield tours, bunkers and trenches preserved, international visitors from France, U.S., Vietnam reconciliation symbol, the artifacts remain, physical evidence still visible. Rusting French tanks collapsed, bunkers, bomb craters throughout valley, artillery pieces in museum tunnels, partially preserved fortification remains, the military influence, Dien Bien Phu tactics influenced. Vietnam War, 1955 to 1975, Viet Cong tunnel systems, Siu Chi, etc. Underground fortifications, anti-aircraft defenses, guerrilla tactics, refined American frustration with invisible enemy, modern asymmetric warfare. Taliban tunnels in Afghanistan, ISIS underground networks, Hamas tunnels in Gaza, underground warfare, standard tactic defense against superior firepower. The strategic studies military academics analyze. Importance of logistics, danger of static positions, value of local knowledge, limits of air power, moral factors in warfare, studied at West Point, U.S., Saint Cyr, France. Military academies worldwide, example of how not to conduct operations, the French memory in France. Dien Bien Phu remains. National trauma symbol of empires, end military disaster, studied veterans honored, lessons learned. Too late for Algeria. The Vietnamese perspective for Vietnam. Greatest military victory, proof of national determination, defeat of colonial power, inspiration for later struggles, national pride, part of independence, narrative, General Giap's legacy, Vo Nguyen Giap, 1911 to 2013 became defense minister-led forces in American War, one of 20th century's great military commanders, self-taught military genius, outlived most contemporaries, national hero. The forgotten allies, credit often overlooks. 200,000 civilian porters and workers, peasants who transported artillery, tunnel diggers working under fire supply line maintainers. Without them, victory impossible, true heroes of Dien Bien Phu, the irony, historical ironies. French sought decisive battle, got won but lost. defeated by army they considered inferior, modern weapons beaten by primitive tools, colonial power humiliated by colonized, lesson unlearned. US repeated many mistakes 10 years later, the universal lesson Dien Bien Phu teaches. Motivation trumps technology, local support is decisive, understanding terrain, crucial logistics determines outcomes, underestimating enemy is fatal, wars aren't won by weapons alone, the ongoing relevance, modern conflicts echo Dien Bien Phu. Iraq, Afghanistan wars, asymmetric warfare tactics, limitations of technological superiority, importance of local support, tunnels and underground warfare, guerrilla tactics defeating conventional forces, history repeats because we don't learn. Dien Bien Phu was won underground. While French forces sat in surface fortifications trusting their firepower and air support, their enemy was tunneling beneath the jungle, positioning artillery in mountains, and engineering a fortress that made conventional warfare obsolete. What we've learned, the battle demonstrated. About warfare. Technology alone doesn't guarantee victory. Logistics and supply matter more than firepower. Local knowledge and support are decisive. Moral factors often outweigh material factors. Adaptation beats rigid doctrine. About engineering. Tunnels provide protection from aerial bombardment. Underground networks negate firepower advantage. Primitive tools plus determination achieve sophistication. Camouflage and concealment defeat surveillance. Vietnamese engineering rivaled modern military capabilities. About history. Dien Bien Phu ended French colonialism, created conditions for Vietnam War. Proved colonial era was overshowed. Determination defeats empire, changed 20th century history. The forgotten warriors we must remember. 200,000 Vietnamese civilians carried supplies through mountains, dug tunnels under bombardment, maintained supply lines, made victory possible. True heroes often overlooked. The physical legacy today. Evidence remains. Preserved tunnels and bunkers, fortification ruins, artillery positions in mountains, museum artifacts, cemeteries. Both sides. Battlefield as memorial, the tactical legacy. Dien Bien Phu established principles. Underground warfare defeats air power, tunnels provide mobility and protection. Concealment is power, local knowledge crucial. Determination overcomes technology used by Viet Cong in Siu Chi, 1960s-70s, Taliban in Afghanistan, 2000s to 2020s, Hamas in Gaza, present. Underground warfare now standard. The strategic legacy changed military thinking. Static defensive positions are vulnerable. Air power has limits. Logistics determines outcomes. Cultural understanding essential. Technology doesn't guarantee success. The political legacy reshaped 20th century. Ended French Empire inspired. Independence movements led to Vietnam War, influenced Cold War dynamics, demonstrated limits of Western power. The universal message Dien Bien Phu reminds us. Empires fall, determination defeats firepower. Local people defending homes are formidable. Engineering and ingenuity matter. History's lessons often ignored, the irony revisited, the deepest irony. French learned painful lessons at Dien Bien Phu. Americans ignored those lessons in Vietnam. Similar mistakes, similar outcomes. Technological superiority, strategic defeat. History repeating itself. The human cost never forget. 25,000 plus killed on both sides, tens of thousands wounded, families destroyed, suffering on all sides. Victory's price was high. The final thought. Dien Bien Phu's bunkers and tunnels symbolize resourcefulness defeating resources, determination trumping technology. Underground warfare's power, human ingenuity's triumph. Why empires ultimately fail. The Valley Fortress that became a tomb for French colonialism. The underground network that changed warfare forever. The battle that proved tunnel beats tank, determination defeats firepower. If this exploration of underground warfare that changed history has shown you how engineering and determination can defeat technological superiority, smash that like button and subscribe for more investigations into the hidden fortifications and forgotten battles that shaped our world. And here's my question for you. Knowing what you now know about Dien Bien Phu, do you think the American military learned from French mistakes when they entered Vietnam 10 years later? Or did hubris and underestimation of the enemy repeat the same pattern? Share your thoughts in the comments. This is a conversation we need to have about the cycles of history. Hit that notification bell. Until then, remember, at Dien Bien Phu, the side that controlled the underground controlled the battle. In modern warfare, that lesson remains as relevant as ever.